I paid for my grandson's medical school, but when I needed help, he put me in a nursing home. So I reminded him who made him important. If you're watching this, subscribe now and let me know where you're tuning in from. Some lessons can only be taught by those who've lived long enough to understand the true cost of forgetting. The day Michael graduated from medical school was the proudest of my life. I stood in the auditorium, my heart swelling as he crossed that stage in his cap and gown. Those watching just saw another young doctor receiving his diploma. They didn't see the mortgage papers I'd signed on my home. They didn't see the 30 years I'd spent raising him after his parents, my only daughter and her husband, died in that terrible crash on Route 9. "Grandma!" Michael rushed toward me after the ceremony, his face flushed with excitement. "I did it!" I cupped his face in my hands. "Your parents would be so proud of you." His eyes glistened. "I'm going to save people, Grandma. No one will die like Mom and Dad did, not when I can help it." We celebrated at Romano's, the little Italian place near our home in Lakeside. I still remember how he couldn't stop talking about his residency placement at Boston Memorial. "It's the best neurosurgical program in the state," he explained, gesturing with his fork. "After my residency, I'll do a fellowship and then you'll be the finest doctor Massachusetts has ever seen," I finished, raising my glass of wine. Michael's laugh filled the restaurant. "All because of you, Grandma. I couldn't have done any of this without you." I shook my head. "I just gave you a foundation. You built everything else. You gave up your retirement to raise me. You sold your dream house to move us closer to my school. You remortgaged your home to pay my tuition." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll never forget what you've done. When I'm established, I'm going to take care of you. You'll never want for anything." I believed him then. Why wouldn't I? He was my Michael, the frightened 7-year-old boy who'd crawled into my bed every night for a year after the accident, clutching his mother's photograph, the determined teenager who'd studied until dawn for his SATs, the compassionate young man who'd chosen medicine to honor his parents' memory. That night, I watched him sleep on my couch, too tall for it now, his feet dangling over the armrest. I thought about the sacrifices. The second job I'd taken to afford his college application fees, the retirement fund I'd drained for his undergraduate tuition. None of it felt like a sacrifice when I looked at him. "It was all worth it," I whispered to the darkened living room. I couldn't have known then how those words would haunt me 15 years later, when that same devoted grandson would stand in a hospital corridor, his voice cold as he discussed my future with his wife. "What are we going to do with her?" he'd ask, as if I were a broken appliance to be discarded. And his wife would reply, "That place near Westfield seems good, and it's far enough away." But on that graduation night, the betrayal still lay ahead, invisible as a tumor silently growing beneath the skin. The changes came so gradually I barely noticed them. Like water wearing down stone, each small erosion seemed insignificant until the damage was done. During his residency, Michael still visited every other Sunday. He'd bring bagels and tell me about his cases, his eyes bright with the thrill of learning. When he started his fellowship, the visits became monthly, then sporadic. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he'd say over the phone. "The schedule is brutal. I'll make it up to you." I kept his favorite cookies in the freezer, thawing them whenever he called to say he was coming. Half the time, they'd go stale when he canceled at the last minute. Then came Vanessa. I met her at Michael's fellowship graduation dinner, tall, elegant, with a dazzling smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Eleanor, Michael talks about you constantly." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "Those stories about you raising him alone, so inspiring." "Just did what any grandmother would do," I replied, watching how she kept a manicured hand on Michael's arm, as if marking her territory. Later that night, I overheard them in the kitchen. "She's sharper than I expected," Vanessa said. "The way you described her, I thought she'd be more what?" Michael asked. "Dependent, I guess. You made it sound like she needed you." I slipped away before hearing his response. After they married, Michael's career accelerated. Chief resident, hospital board committees, medical journal publications. Each achievement pushed me further to the periphery of his life. Their housewarming party was my first glimpse of their new reality. A sprawling colonial in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, filled with Michael's colleagues and Vanessa's friends from her investment firm. "Eleanor, come meet Dr. Abernathy," Michael called, guiding me by the elbow. "She'll be fascinated by your perspective on how medicine has changed." Mom was a teacher for 40 years, he explained to his colleague. Mom, not Grandma, as if he'd rewritten our history to make it more palatable for his new circle. At dinner, I sat between a urologist and his wife, who asked polite questions about my teaching career before turning to more interesting guests. Across the table, Michael laughed at something Vanessa whispered, looking more like a stranger than the boy I'd raised. The final course was being served when Vanessa approached. Michael said you were feeling tired. I've called you a car service. But dessert hasn't. The driver's already waiting. Her smile was perfect, practiced. Michael sends his love. He's talking to Dr. Kaplan about a research opportunity and can't break away. I searched the room for my grandson, finding him deep in conversation. Unaware I was leaving, the driver helped me into the car, closing the door on the bright lights of the house, Michael's house, where I no longer belonged. As we pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text. Sorry you had to leave early. Let's have lunch next week. Love you. We didn't have lunch the next week, or the week after. When I called, his assistant answered. Dr. Whitman's schedule is completely full for the next month, but I'll tell him you called. Mrs. I'm sorry, who is this again? My hand trembled as I hung up the phone, the distance between us suddenly measurable in more than miles. Hello? You've reached Dr. Michael Whitman. I'm unavailable to take your call. I hung up, the automated greeting cutting off mid-sentence. It was the third time I'd called this week. 3 times I'd heard his recorded voice instead of the real thing. My left hand had been tingling all morning. Just a pinched nerve, probably. But when I dropped my coffee mug and couldn't grip the broom to sweep up the shards, a cold dread settled in my stomach. Just call him one more time, I told myself, dialing with clumsy fingers. Miraculously, he answered on the second ring. Grandma? I'm between surgeries. Is everything okay? His voice echoed in what sounded like a hallway. Michael, I'm having some strange symptoms. My left side feels weak, and I keep dropping things. Yesterday, I got confused about vovô, he interrupted, using the Portuguese endearment he hadn't used in years. You're 87. These things happen. Take some Tylenol and rest. I've got to go. They're prepping my next patient. But I'll call this weekend. Okay? Love you. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, the tingling in my hand spreading up my arm. That night, I struggled to sleep, positioned awkwardly to avoid pressing on my tingling arm. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text. For a moment, I thought Michael had remembered my concerns, but it was just an automated reminder about my upcoming dentist appointment. The next morning, I called Dr. Peterson, my primary care physician for 20 years. His receptionist squeezed me in that afternoon. Your blood pressure is quite elevated, Eleanor, he said, frowning at his notes. And these symptoms you're describing, have you told your grandson about this? Given his specialty, he might have insights. I nodded, unwilling to admit that Michael had brushed me off. I'd like to schedule some tests, Dr. Peterson continued. An MRI at minimum. With your family history, my daughter's aneurysm, I said quietly. The same condition that had killed her at 39, leaving Michael an orphan. As I left the clinic, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Grandma? Listen, Vanessa and I are hosting a dinner party next Saturday for some hospital board members. We'd like you to come. No mention of my health concerns. No follow-up from our earlier conversation. Dr. Peterson wants me to have an MRI, I said instead of answering. A pause. What for? The symptoms I mentioned. He's concerned about. Peterson's always been overcautious. But sure, get the MRI if it makes you feel better. So, Saturday at 7? Vanessa's having the car service pick you up at 6. As he rattled off details about the dinner, I caught a muffled exchange in the background. Is that her again? Vanessa's voice, slightly annoyed. Just confirming for Saturday, Michael replied, his hand presumably covering the phone. Then louder. Gotta run, Grandma. See you Saturday. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the calendar where I'd penciled in Michael Med School graduation, 15 years earlier. Next to it, a faded photograph of him in his cap and gown, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. You promised you'd take care of me, I whispered to his smiling image. What happened to us, Michael? The tingling in my arm intensified, a physical manifestation of the numbness growing between us. The dinner party gleamed with wealth and prestige. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier that hung over Michael and Vanessa's massive dining table. I sat near the end, beside a pharmaceutical representative who'd spent 15 minutes explaining why his company's pricing was actually quite reasonable. Considering the research costs, I'd barely touched my salmon. The tingling in my arm had progressed to a dull ache that radiated across my chest, and the room occasionally tilted when I moved my head too quickly. Across the table, Michael was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of surgery. Vanessa, at the opposite end, laughed too loudly at something another guest said. Neither had spoken more than a few sentences to me all evening. "Eleanor, wasn't Michael just the most serious little boy?" Dr. Abernathy asked, breaking into my thoughts. "He tells us you practically raised him single-handedly." "After my daughter and son-in-law died," I nodded. "He was 7. And you put him through medical school? On a teacher's salary? Remarkable." "I remortgaged my house," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Sold my retirement property on the lake." Dr. Abernathy's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a sacrifice." "He was worth every penny." I tried to lift my water glass, but my fingers wouldn't cooperate. "He promised he'd take care of me when I got older." The glass slipped from my hand, water splashing across the imported tablecloth. Conversation halted as everyone turned to look. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, trying to blot the spill with my napkin. But my left arm wouldn't move properly, and the room was spinning faster now. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael called from the head of the table, his voice echoing strangely. I tried to answer, but my words came out slurred. The last thing I saw was Vanessa's annoyed expression as I slid from my chair onto the polished hardwood floor. "For God's sake," I heard her say. "She always needs attention at the worst possible times." Darkness swallowed me then, but consciousness returned in fragments. The wail of an ambulance siren, the cold metal of a gurney beneath me, urgent voices using medical terminology I didn't understand, and through it all, Michael's voice, not comforting me, but issuing clinical orders to the EMTs as if I were any other patient. "Potential CVA, patient is 87, history of hypertension." In the emergency room, I drifted in and out of awareness. Bright lights, the scratch of a hospital gown, machines beeping in steady rhythm. Hours later, or was it minutes, I heard Michael's voice again, not from beside my bed, but from the hallway outside my room. "Left-sided weakness, but the CT shows a relatively small bleed. Cognitive function appears mostly intact." Vanessa's voice followed, lower, but clear enough. "So, what's the prognosis?" "She'll need rehabilitation, physical therapy, possibly occupational therapy." "For how long?" A pause. "Could be months, maybe longer." "Michael," Vanessa's voice sharpened, "we can't do this. Your conference schedule alone, not to mention my promotion. We've talked about this." I struggled to open my eyes, to call out, but my body refused to cooperate. "What are we going to do with her?" Michael asked, his voice heavy with resignation. "You know what we need to do. That place near Westfield looks good in the brochures, and it's far enough away." "Sunshine Haven," Michael said quietly. "I'll make the calls tomorrow." I lay perfectly still, tears sliding silently into my hair. In that moment, I realized the cruelest truth. My grandson had died years ago, replaced by this stranger who wore his face but not his heart. Sunshine Haven smelled of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. My room, half of a shared space divided by a thin curtain, contained a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window overlooking the parking lot. A far cry from the home I'd sacrificed to fund Michael's education. "You'll adjust, Mrs. Whitman," the intake nurse assured me, adjusting my pillow with brisk efficiency. "We have activities every afternoon, bingo on Tuesdays." I'd been at Sunshine Haven for 3 weeks. Michael had visited once, the day he dropped me off. He'd promised to return the following weekend, but called to cancel, citing an emergency surgery. "I brought some paperwork," he said during that first visit, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Just standard forms for your care and insurance." The new medication made my vision blur, the words on the pages swimming before me. "What exactly am I signing?" I asked, squinting at the documents. "Nothing important. Medical authorization so I can talk to your doctors. Insurance forms. Standard procedure." He placed a pen in my hand and guided it to the signature line. "The nurses need these on file." I signed where he indicated, too disoriented to read the small print, too trusting to question him. That evening, after he left, a candy striper delivered a small box to my room. "Your grandson asked me to give you this," she said, placing it on my nightstand. Inside was my old flip phone and charger with a note. Thought you might want this. Reception isn't great here, but you can try. Love, Michael. I tried calling him that night. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message he never returned. As weeks turned into months, I worked diligently with the physical therapists, determined to regain my independence. By the second month, I could walk short distances with a walker. By the third, I could dress myself, though buttons remained a challenge for my weakened left hand. It was during my 4th month at Sunshine Haven that I met Doris Morgan. I was in the common room, attempting to read a dog-eared romance novel despite the blaring television, when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, but could someone please turn down that infernal racket? Some of us are trying to read." The speaker was a thin woman with steel-gray hair cut in a precise bob. She sat ramrod straight in her wheelchair, a leather-bound book open on her lap. No one moved to adjust the volume. The woman sighed dramatically, wheeled herself to the television, and reduced the volume herself, ignoring the protests from 2 residents watching a game show. "Thank you," I said when she returned to her spot near me. "I didn't do it for you," she replied crisply. Then, after a pause, "But you're welcome. I'm Doris Morgan." "Eleanor Whitman." She assessed me with shrewd eyes. "Stroke?" I nodded. 5 months ago. "Heart failure," she said, gesturing to herself, "plus arthritis that would make a saint curse. I was a corporate attorney for 40 years. Now I'm apparently only qualified to play bingo and watch reruns of Golden Girls." Her candor made me smile. "I was a teacher. Raised my grandson after his parents died. He's a neurosurgeon now." "And he put you in this place?" Doris raised an eyebrow. "Some gratitude." My smile faltered. "He's very busy." "Aren't we all?" she countered. "I still manage my stock portfolio from this hellhole. Being old doesn't make us useless." Over the following weeks, Doris introduced me to her small circle. Walter Brennan, a former systems engineer with a perpetual scowl and surprising wit, and Ruby Washington, an ex-nurse with bright eyes and a gift for getting extra desserts from the kitchen staff. "Welcome to the resistance," Ruby told me one afternoon as we sat in the garden. "We may be old, but we're not dead yet." I laughed, feeling something loosen in my chest, something that had been tight since the night I overheard Michael and Vanessa discussing me as a problem to be solved. "My grandson thinks I am," I said, surprising myself with the admission. Ruby patted my hand. Then it's time he learned otherwise, isn't it?" "Straighten your left arm," Lisa, the physical therapist, instructed. "Good. Now reach for the ball." I stretched toward the small rubber ball, my fingers trembling with effort. After 6 months of intensive therapy, I'd regained significant mobility, surpassing the doctor's expectations. "You're making remarkable progress, Eleanor," Lisa said as I grasped the ball. "Most patients your age with similar strokes don't recover this quickly. Most patients my age don't have as much motivation," I replied, thinking of the overheard conversation between Michael and Vanessa. Later, in the common room, I joined my newfound friends for afternoon coffee. Doris was reviewing financial statements, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Walter tinkered with his ancient tablet, while Ruby dealt playing cards for our daily game of hearts. "Michael called this morning," I announced, settling into my chair. "He's coming to visit on Saturday." "First time in what, 3 months?" Ruby asked, shuffling the deck with practiced hands. 4, I corrected. "He's been at conferences, and Vanessa's firm is expanding, so they've been traveling." Walter snorted. "My son uses the same excuses. Too busy to visit, never too busy for a Hawaiian vacation. I see the pictures on Facebook." "You can access Facebook?" I asked, surprised. He patted his tablet. "This old thing still works. Tommy gave it to me 3 Christmases ago so I could see pictures of the grandkids. Half the time he forgets to post any." "Walter was quite the technical genius," Doris explained. "Worked on early computer systems before most people had heard of them." "I wouldn't call myself a genius," Walter grumbled, but his eyes crinkled with pleasure at the compliment. Ruby dealt the cards. "So, Eleanor, what's your plan for the big visit?" "Plan? I'm just happy he's coming." The 3 exchanged glances. "What?" I asked. Doris set down her financial papers. "Eleanor, we've been talking. The way your grandson has treated you, it's not right. He's busy. His career is no excuse," Ruby interrupted firmly. "I worked hospital shifts for 40 years, raised 3 children on my own after my husband died. Never once did I dump my mother in a facility and forget about her." "What Ruby's trying to say," Walter added more gently, "is that we think You deserve better. And we think you know it too, Doris concluded. I stared at my cards, unable to meet their eyes. They were right, of course. The long stretches without visits or calls. The perfunctory 10-minute phone conversations when he did call. The way he'd casually mentioned last month that they were exploring options with my house, as if it were already his property. He's still my grandson, I said finally. The little boy I raised. That boy grew into a man who made choices, Ruby said, laying down her first card. Bad ones. What would you have me do? I'm stuck here. Doris leaned forward. Are you? The doctors say your recovery is exceptional. Your mind is sharp as ever. The only thing keeping you here is your grandson's control over your finances and medical decisions, which you gave him when you signed those papers, Walter added. My stomach twisted at the memory of those blurry documents I'd signed without reading. I trusted him, and he betrayed that trust, Ruby said bluntly. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked around at these three people who'd become my allies in this sterile place. Doris, with her legal mind. Walter, with his technical skills. Ruby, with her medical knowledge and fierce loyalty. I don't know, I admitted. What can I do? Doris smiled thinly. More than you think, Eleanor. More than anyone suspects. As our game progressed, I found myself sitting straighter, my resolve hardening with each card played. They were right. I'd spent my life as an educator, teaching children to stand up for themselves, to fight injustice, to speak truth to power. It was time I followed my own lessons. When Michael visits, I said as I played the winning card of the hand, I want to find out exactly what he's done with my house and my money. And how do you propose to do that? Doris asked. I met her gaze steadily. I'm his grandmother. I'll ask him directly. Walter chuckled. And if he lies? Then we move to plan B, I replied, surprising myself with my certainty. And I'll need all of your help. Michael arrived late on Saturday, his surgical scrubs exchanged for designer casual wear, his expression a practiced blend of concern and professional detachment. You're looking better, Grandma, he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne was expensive, unfamiliar. The physical therapy helps, I replied, when they don't cut my sessions. His smile faltered slightly. The insurance only covers so much. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. We sat in the small private meeting room I'd reserved for our visit, an institutional space with motivational posters and vinyl chairs. How's your house? I asked casually. Still enjoying Beacon Hill? It's good. Busy with renovations. Vanessa wants to redo the kitchen. And my house? How are those options you mentioned coming along? Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then set it face down on the table. Actually, we found a buyer. Good offer, well above market value. They're eager to close quickly. My heart stuttered. You're selling my house? Without consulting me? Grandma, we discussed this. The property tax is a loan. It doesn't make sense to keep it empty. We never discussed selling. And it's still my house, Michael. He sighed, using the same patient tone he probably used with confused patients. The power of attorney you signed gives me authority to manage your assets. The money will go into a trust for your care. I want to see the documents, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. All of them. The power of attorney, the trust agreement, everything. They're at my office. I'll bring copies next time. And when will that be? Another 4 months from now? His jaw tightened. I'm trying to balance a lot, Grandma. My practice, hospital committees, Vanessa's career. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered it, turning slightly away from me. Sorry, I have to take this. It's the hospital. He stood and walked to the corner of the room. Dr. Whitman speaking. While he talked, I noticed his tablet sitting on the chair beside me, its screen illuminated with notifications. One caught my eye. An email from A. Peterson, Sunshine Haven Administrator, with the subject line, Eleanor Whitman Care Plan Adjustment. Michael's conversation continued, something about a patient's test results. Without allowing myself to think about it, I picked up the tablet. The device wasn't locked. Why would it be? He never imagined I'd look. With trembling fingers, I tapped the email notification. Dr. Whitman, it read, this confirms receipt of your request to adjust Eleanor Whitman's care plan to the basic package, effective next month. While we typically recommend maintaining the enhanced package for stroke recovery patients, especially those showing improvement, we will proceed as directed. Please sign and return the attached form to authorize this change. My vision blurred with tears as I quickly photographed the screen with the flip phone Ruby had shown me how to use. I scrolled quickly through his inbox, finding emails about my house sale, discussions with Vanessa about using my retirement funds to cover what he called temporary cash flow issues, and correspondence with lawyers about creating a more restrictive trust arrangement. I photographed as many screens as I could before Michael's call ended. I placed the tablet back on the chair just as he turned around. Sorry about that. Where were we? You were explaining why you're too busy to visit your grandmother, I said, my voice remarkably calm considering the storm inside me. He had the grace to look ashamed. Grandma, that's not fair. I'm trying my best. Are you? I gestured around the room. Is this your best? Putting me in a facility hours from Boston? Selling my home without my consent? Reducing my care plan to save money? His expression shifted from guilt to alarm. What are you talking about? How did you know about the care plan? Or the house? Or how you've been using my retirement money? I leaned forward. I may be old, Michael, but I'm not stupid. You don't understand the financial realities, he said, his voice hardening. The cost of keeping you here is a fraction of what I spent putting you through medical school, I finished. A debt you promised to repay by taking care of me when I got older. Michael stood abruptly. I think you're getting overexcited. Maybe we should continue this another time. When? In another 4 months? I'll come back when you're calmer. He gathered his things, avoiding my eyes. The medications sometimes affect your mood. I'll speak with your doctor about adjusting them. As he reached the door, I called after him. I remember everything, Michael. Every promise you made, every sacrifice I made for you. He paused, but didn't turn around. Goodbye, Grandma. I'll call you. After he left, I sat alone in the sterile room, clutching my flip phone with its photographic evidence. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from rage and determination. Ruby found me there 20 minutes later. Did you get what you needed? She asked. I nodded, showing her the phone. More than I wanted to. Good, she said, her eyes flashing with righteous anger on my behalf. Then it's time for phase 2. Let me get this straight, Doris said, reviewing the photos on my flip phone. He's selling your house, using your retirement funds, and cutting your therapy, all without your informed consent? We sat in Walter's room, our unofficial War Council headquarters. Walter had propped a handwritten, "Do not disturb medication adjustment" sign on his door to ensure privacy. And he forged my signature on the house listing agreement, I added, pointing to a document visible in one email. That's definitely not my handwriting. Ruby whistled low. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. The power of attorney complicates things, Doris cautioned. If it's comprehensive enough, it might give him broad authority over your assets. But I signed it while medicated, I reminded her. I was barely conscious after the stroke, which could make it contestable. Doris nodded thoughtfully. I practiced corporate law, not elder law, but I know people who specialize in this area. Walter, who had been quietly examining the photos, looked up. The evidence is compelling, but limited. These email snippets don't tell the whole story. What do you suggest? I asked. We need more. He tapped his ancient tablet. If I had access to his email account, I could help you gather comprehensive evidence. That feels like an invasion. I hesitated. More invasive than him selling your house without permission? Ruby asked pointedly. Besides, Doris added, we're not talking about publishing his personal correspondence. We're talking about protecting your rights and assets. I considered this. Even if we wanted to, how would we access his accounts? I don't have his passwords. Walter smiled for the first time since I'd met him. He left his tablet unlocked once. He might do it again. But he won't be back for months, I pointed out. Actually, Ruby interjected, I may have a solution for that. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket. My niece Sarah is a journalist for the Westfield Gazette. She's been wanting to do a feature on vibrant seniors at local care facilities. How does that help us? I asked. Sarah could interview you as part of her story. Your background is compelling. Teacher, raised grandson alone, he becomes successful neurosurgeon. Human interest gold, Ruby's eyes gleamed. And when she publishes it, Michael will see it, I finished, understanding dawning. His colleagues might see it too. And he'll feel compelled to visit, Doris concluded, to make sure you're not saying anything unflattering. Meanwhile, Walter added, I can show you how to access and save more information from his accounts if he brings his tablet again. I looked around at my 3 allies. Doris with her legal mind, Walter with his technical knowledge, Ruby with her connections and fierce loyalty. For the first time since my stroke, I felt something beyond anger and helplessness. I felt powerful. There's something else we should consider, Doris said, her expression grave. If we move forward with this, Michael may retaliate. He could transfer you to a worse facility, cut off your visitors, restrict your phone access. A chill ran through me at the thought. Can he do that? With medical power of attorney? Potentially, yes. We fell silent, the reality of our vulnerable positions settling over us. Finally, Ruby spoke. Every revolution has risks, Eleanor. The question is, are you willing to take them? I thought about Michael. Not the man who had abandoned me to this place, but the boy I had raised, the child who had crawled into my bed crying after nightmares about his parents' death, the teenager who had worked after school to save for college application fees, insisting on contributing despite my protests, the medical student who had promised to make me proud. Then I thought about the cold calculation in his voice as he discussed me with Vanessa in that hospital corridor. What are we going to do with her? My decision crystallized. I'm willing, I said firmly, but we need to be smart, strategic. Doris nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like a lawyer. First, I continued, we need to document my mental competence, official evaluations that prove I'm capable of making my own decisions. I can help with that, Ruby said. I know which doctors here aren't in Michael's pocket. Next, we need copies of all the documents I signed, especially the power of attorney. I'll contact my colleague Patricia Levine, Doris offered. She specializes in elder law and can request those documents officially. And finally, I concluded, we need a plan for financial independence. Michael controls my accounts, but he doesn't know about the safety deposit box at First National. 3 pairs of eyes widened. What safety deposit box? Walter asked. I smiled for the first time in months. The one containing my husband's life insurance policy and 20 years of birthday and Christmas checks I never cashed. Not enough to buy back my house, but enough to fight for it. Ruby slapped her knee in delight. Eleanor Whitman, you've been holding out on us. A good teacher always keeps a few lessons in reserve, I replied, feeling a spark of my old self returning. The woman who had faced widowhood, raised a child alone, and built a career despite countless obstacles. So, we're really doing this? Walter confirmed, his usual gruffness softened by something like hope. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Michael taught me an important lesson by putting me here. He taught me that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. I looked each of my friends in the eye. Now it's my turn to teach him something about consequences. Sarah Jenkins from the Westfield Gazette arrived on a Tuesday morning, her press badge hanging from a lanyard, her smile genuine as she shook my hand. Mrs. Whitman, thank you for agreeing to this interview, she said, setting up a small recorder. Aunt Ruby speaks very highly of you. Ruby exaggerates, I replied, smoothing my best cardigan, the one I'd asked the aide to iron for this occasion. I'm just an old teacher with a fairly ordinary life. Sarah's eyes twinkled. Putting your grandson through medical school single-handedly hardly seems ordinary. We sat in the garden, autumn leaves drifting around us as I shared carefully selected stories. Michael as a grieving child, my years teaching while raising him, the pride I felt when he graduated medical school. You mortgaged your home to pay his tuition? Sarah confirmed, her pencil poised over her notepad. The entire amount, I nodded. Over $300,000 with interest, but it was worth every penny to help him achieve his dream. And now he's a successful neurosurgeon at Boston Memorial. That must be gratifying. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Success can change people in unexpected ways. Sarah tilted her head. How so? Sometimes, when people achieve great things, they forget the shoulders they stood on to reach those heights. Her pencil stilled. Mrs. Whitman, are you saying your grandson has forgotten your sacrifices? I met her gaze steadily. I'm saying that the true measure of a person isn't their professional success, but how they treat those who can no longer do anything for them. Sarah glanced at her recorder, then switched it off. This conversation just got more interesting. Off the record, is everything okay between you and Dr. Whitman? The concern in her voice nearly undid me. When was the last time someone had asked about my welfare with genuine interest? Between us, I said softly, I suffered a stroke at Michael's house 9 months ago. He had me transferred here within days. He's visited once. Sarah's expression darkened. And this facility is 2 hours from Boston, far enough that visits are inconvenient. I see, she made a note in her pad. Made a note. And the house you mortgaged for his education? Being sold without my knowledge or consent. Sarah's professional demeanor slipped momentarily. Forgive me, that's appalling. It's complicated, I acknowledged. Legally, he may have the right. I signed documents after my stroke when I was heavily medicated. Mrs. Whitman, Sarah said, leaning forward. Would you be willing to tell this story? The full story? I hesitated. I don't want to destroy Michael's reputation. What about a story that doesn't name him directly? A piece about elder financial abuse using your experience as a central example without identifying your grandson specifically? That might work, I said slowly. If it could help others in my situation. Exactly. Sarah's eyes lit up with journalistic fire. This isn't about revenge. It's about awareness, about justice. 2 weeks later, Sarah's article appeared on the front page of the Westfield Gazette's Sunday edition. The Price of Devotion, When Family Caregivers Become Financial Predators. The piece detailed my decades of sacrifice, the stroke and the subsequent betrayal, all without naming Michael directly. It concluded with resources for elders facing similar situations and a quote from Patricia Levine, Doris's lawyer friend, about the rise in elder financial abuse cases. By Monday afternoon, the article had been picked up by a medical ethics blog. By Tuesday, it was trending on several social media platforms. On Wednesday, Michael called. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Hello, Michael. It's been weeks since I've heard from you. Don't play innocent. That article, people at the hospital are talking. They think it's about me. Is it?" I asked mildly. A pause. "I'm coming to see you tomorrow. We need to discuss this in person." After he hung up, I called Ruby immediately. "He took the bait," I told her. "He's coming tomorrow." "Perfect," she replied. "I'll alert the others. Operation Dignity is a go." That night, I couldn't sleep. Was I doing the right thing? Was this justice or revenge? The line seemed increasingly blurred. I remembered the last time I'd seen my daughter alive, how she'd hugged Michael goodbye before leaving for the trip that would end in tragedy. "Take care of Grandma if anything happens to us," she'd told him. Not seriously expecting the worst, but instilling the value nonetheless. "I promise," 7-year-old Michael had replied solemnly. Promises made, promises broken. The story of our lives, written in the invisible ink of expectation and disappointment. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, one that I would write myself, in ink that could never be erased. Michael arrived precisely at 10 a.m., his face a mask of professional composure that did nothing to hide the tension in his shoulders. He found me in the common room, playing cards with Walter, while Ruby and Doris pretended to read nearby. "Grandma, we need to talk." Privately? I laid down my cards. "These are my friends, Michael. Anything you need to say can be said in front of them." His jaw tightened. "This is a family matter. And since you're my only family who bothers to show up, that makes this quick work." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Sit. Talk." He remained standing. "That article is causing problems for me. My colleagues, the hospital board, people are making connections." "To what?" I asked innocently. "The article didn't name anyone. Don't be naive. It's specific enough that anyone who knows me can figure it out." He lowered his voice. "Is this about money? Because if it is, it's about respect," I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "And honesty. 2 things I thought I taught you." Michael glanced at my friends, clearly uncomfortable with witnesses. "Look, I've made an appointment with Dr. Singh to evaluate your medication. I think your current regimen is affecting your judgment." Walter snorted loudly. Michael shot him a glare before continuing. "I'm also considering whether Sunshine Haven is the right facility for your needs." "Is that a threat?" Ruby asked sharply. Michael ignored her, focusing on me. "I've only ever wanted what's best for you, Grandma. But this behavior, collaborating with journalists, making implications about my character, it suggests your condition might be worse than we thought." "My condition," I repeated slowly, "is that I'm tired of being treated like an inconvenient obligation." His expression hardened. "I have responsibilities, a career, a marriage, all made possible by my sacrifices," I finished for him. "Sacrifices you promised to honor by taking care of me when I needed you." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or just annoyance at being challenged. He reached into his jacket and withdrew his tablet. "I want to show you something." He tapped the screen, then turned it toward me. These are your medical records, the cognitive assessments after your stroke. They indicate significant impairment in judgment and decision-making. I studied the document, noting the date, 3 days after my stroke, when I was heavily sedated and barely conscious. Interesting timing on that assessment, Doris remarked, abandoning any pretense of not listening. Was Mrs. Whitman even fully conscious then? Michael's head snapped toward her. Excuse me, but who are you? Doris Morgan, former senior partner at Lieberman and Associates. She extended her hand with perfect professional courtesy. I specialized in corporate fraud cases for 40 years. Michael ignored her hand. This is a private medical discussion. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. I believe it's become a legal one. We all turned to see a tall woman in a crisp suit entering the room, briefcase in hand. Patricia Levine, she announced, striding forward to hand Michael a business card. Elder law specialist. I've been retained to represent Eleanor Whitman. Michael stared at the card. This is ridiculous. I'm her medical proxy and power of attorney. About that, Patricia replied, opening her briefcase to extract a folder. I've filed a petition to revoke both, on grounds that they were obtained while Mrs. Whitman was medically incapacitated and without proper witnesses or disclosure of terms. The blood drained from Michael's face. You can't do that. I already have. Patricia handed him a document. This is your copy of the court filing. You'll also find a temporary restraining order preventing any changes to Mrs. Whitman's current assets or living arrangements pending a hearing. Michael's tablet slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table. I reached for it casually, as if to prevent it from falling further. You've also been formally reported to the Massachusetts Medical Board for potential ethics violations, Patricia continued, her voice professionally neutral. Specifically regarding using your position as a physician to influence financial decisions for a family member without proper disclosure or consent. This is insane, Michael sputtered, his composure finally cracking. Grandma, tell them this isn't what you want. I looked at my grandson, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become, the stranger he now was to me. For a moment, I saw the frightened 7-year-old who'd lost his parents, superimposed over the arrogant surgeon who'd abandoned me when I needed him most. What I want, I said quietly, is what I've earned. Respect, dignity, and the right to control my own life, for whatever time I have left. Michael's face contorted with a complex mixture of emotions, anger, disbelief, and something that might have been shame. Fine, he said finally. Have it your way. But don't expect me to keep paying for this place when you've turned against me. Oh, I won't need your money, I replied, turning his tablet around to show the screen. Not my medical records, but his email inbox, now open after I'd entered the password I'd watched him type during his previous visit. I have access to my own accounts again, and evidence of exactly how you've been managing them. For the first time in my life, I saw my grandson speechless. The look of utter shock on his face would have been comical under different circumstances. You should go now, Michael, I said gently. Your lawyer will be hearing from mine very soon. As he backed toward the door, Patricia added, and Dr. Whitman, I'd advise against making any significant financial transactions in the immediate future. The court tends to frown on that once proceedings have begun. After he left, the room erupted in quiet celebration. Walter patted my shoulder awkwardly. Ruby squeezed my hand. Doris nodded with professional approval. But beneath the triumph, my heart ached. In winning this battle, I had likely lost my only family forever. Are you okay? Ruby asked softly, noticing my expression. I did what I had to do, I replied. The rest remains to be seen. The hearing took place 4 months later in a wood-paneled courtroom in Springfield. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Patricia, my back straight despite the dull ache that had become my constant companion. All rise, the bailiff called as the judge entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes. Michael sat at the defense table with his attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit. He hadn't looked at me once since entering the courtroom. The gallery behind us was surprisingly full. Ruby, Doris, and Walter occupied the front row. Behind them sat Janet, the social worker from Sunshine Haven, who had provided key testimony about my mental competence. Sarah Jenkins from the Westfield Gazette was there too, notebook in hand, though this was officially a closed hearing. Most surprising was the presence of Vanessa in the last row, sitting alone, her expression unreadable. This court is now in session, Judge Harmon announced. Whitman versus Whitman, petition to revoke power of attorney and request for financial accounting. What followed was 3 hours of detailed testimony. Patricia presented evidence of my mental competence, including recent evaluations from 3 separate neurologists. She demonstrated the suspicious timing of the power of attorney signing, just hours after I'd received a significant increase in pain medication. Most damaging was the financial evidence. Bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to cover what appeared to be Michael and Vanessa's personal expenses. Emails discussing how to structure the sale of my house to maximize their benefit, and documented instances where Michael had overruled medical recommendations for my care to reduce costs. Michael's attorney argued that all actions were within the legal bounds of the power of attorney and were made with my best interests in mind. Dr. Whitman is a respected medical professional who understands his grandmother's needs better than she does herself, he insisted. These financial decisions were necessary to ensure her long-term care. When it was my turn to testify, I made my way slowly to the witness stand, refusing the offered wheelchair. I wanted the judge to see me standing on my own 2 feet. Mrs. Whitman, Patricia began, could you explain to the court your understanding of the documents you signed after your stroke? I had no understanding, I replied clearly. I was heavily medicated. Michael told me they were standard forms for my medical care. He never mentioned they would give him control over my house or finances. And if you had understood, would you have signed them? Absolutely not, I stated firmly. I raised Michael after his parents died. I sacrificed my retirement and mortgaged my home to put him through medical school. I did this willingly, out of love, but I never intended to surrender control of my life to anyone, not even him. During cross-examination, Michael's attorney tried to paint me as confused and resentful. Isn't it true that you've been angry with your grandson for abandoning you, as you perceive it? He asked. I've been disappointed, I corrected. There's a difference. And this legal action? Isn't it really about punishing Dr. Whitman for not visiting as often as you'd like? I met the attorney's gaze steadily. This action is about justice, about honoring promises made. Michael promised to care for me as I aged. Instead, he treated me as a burden to be managed from a distance. The attorney's expression hardened. So this is about revenge. I shook my head. No, it's about remembering who we are and what we owe each other. Michael seems to have forgotten both. When Michael took the stand, he spoke of the financial pressures of maintaining my care, the difficult decisions he'd had to make as my condition deteriorated. Everything I did was for her benefit, he insisted. The house was sitting empty, costing money in taxes and maintenance. The sale proceeds were intended for her care fund. Yet the documents show you used some of those proceeds to pay off personal debts, Patricia pointed out during cross-examination. Temporary allocations, Michael responded stiffly. I intended to repay those amounts. Like your grandmother, intended to be repaid for financing your medical education? Patricia asked. Judge Harmon intervened before he could answer. The court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. During the break, I stepped into the hallway for air, leaning heavily on my cane. To my surprise, Vanessa approached me. Mrs. Whitman, she said, her voice low, I want you to know I had no idea about some of what Michael was doing. The house sale, yes, but not the other financial arrangements. I studied her face, searching for sincerity. What changed, Vanessa? You were quite eager to have me placed in Sunshine Haven. She looked away. The medical board investigation. It could ruin his career, our lives. And for what? Her eyes met mine again. Was it worth it destroying your grandson like this? The question hung between us, heavy with accusation and fear. I didn't destroy Michael, I replied finally. He did that himself, one broken promise at a time. As Vanessa walked away, I wondered if Michael had sent her to appeal to my sympathies. If so, he'd miscalculated badly. Back in the courtroom, Judge Harmon listened to closing arguments with an impassive expression. When both sides had finished, she spoke directly to me. Mrs. Whitman, regardless of my ruling, I want to acknowledge your courage in bringing this case forward. Elder financial abuse often goes unreported because victims fear exactly the kind of family rupture you're experiencing now. She turned to Michael. Dr. Whitman, your professional achievements are commendable, but they do not exempt you from ethical obligations to your family members. The judge shuffled her papers, then delivered her ruling. The power of attorney was revoked immediately. Control of my remaining assets would be returned to me, and Michael would be required to provide a full accounting of all transactions made using my funds, with any personal use to be repaid with interest. Furthermore, she concluded, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation regarding the unauthorized signature on the house sale documents. This court is adjourned. As people began to file out, I remained seated, suddenly exhausted. The victory felt hollow. I had won my freedom and financial independence, but at what cost? Michael passed my table without a glance, his shoulders rigid with humiliation and anger. Michael, I called softly. He paused, but didn't turn. I never wanted this, I said. I just wanted you to remember who you are, who we were to each other. For a moment, I thought he might respond. Instead, he continued walking, disappearing through the courtroom doors and, perhaps from my life forever. Ruby appeared at my side, her warm hand covering mine. You did what needed to be done, Eleanor. No matter what happens next, remember that. I nodded, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. Not for the money or the house or even the betrayal, but for the little boy I had loved, who somewhere along the way had forgotten how to love me back. 1 year after the court hearing, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment in a senior living community in Cambridge, watching autumn leaves dance across the courtyard. The community was everything Sunshine Haven wasn't: bright, engaging, respectful of its residents' autonomy. Ruby lived 3 doors down, having moved here shortly after I did. Walter and Doris remained at Sunshine Haven, but visited regularly, Walter grumbling good-naturedly about the taxi fare. The proceeds from my house sale, returned to me after the court order, had been enough to secure this comfortable apartment and establish a modest trust for my ongoing care, managed by a court-appointed fiduciary. Not luxury, but dignity. It was enough. Mail's here, Ruby announced, entering with a small stack of envelopes, including something from Boston Memorial. My heart quickened as I accepted the letter. It had been 6 months since I'd had any contact with Michael. After the hearing, the medical board had placed him on probation and required him to complete an ethics program. The district attorney had ultimately declined to pursue criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence of intent to defraud. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was not a letter, but a brochure for the hospital's new community care initiative, providing specialized neurological services to underserved populations. A yellow sticky note was attached in Michael's handwriting. First patients next week. Thought you might want to know. What is it? Ruby asked, noting my expression. A beginning, perhaps, I replied, showing her the brochure. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. The landline I'd insisted on having, despite Ruby's teasing about my technological resistance. Grandma? Michael's voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. It's me. Hello, Michael, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I received the brochure. I'm starting there next Thursday, 1 day a week for now, alongside my regular practice. Community medicine. That was your original plan, wasn't it? Before the fellowships and specializations. A pause. You remember that? I remember everything, I said simply. Another pause, longer this time. I've been thinking a lot about what you said in court, about remembering who we are to each other. I waited, allowing him the space to continue. The ethics program made me confront some uncomfortable truths, he continued, about how I've changed, about the choices I've made. And I'm trying to do better. His voice cracked slightly. Vanessa and I are separated, have been since the hearing. The divorce will be final next month. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Don't be, it's been clarifying. Made me realize how much I'd let her influence my priorities. He took a deep breath. Grandma, I know I can't undo what I did, but I'd like to see you, if you're willing. The request hung between us, weighted with years of disappointment and betrayal. Thursday is my book club, I said finally. But I'm free for lunch on Friday. 3 days later, Michael arrived at precisely noon, looking both familiar and strange. The same face, but somehow softer, less certain. He'd brought sandwiches from the deli we used to visit near my old house. You remembered, I said, accepting the paper-wrapped package. Turkey on rye, extra pickles, no mayo. He attempted a smile. Some things stay with you. We ate at my small kitchen table, the conversation stilted but civil. He told me about the community clinic, about patients he'd already screened for the program. I shared stories about Ruby's latest hobby, watercolor painting, and Walter's ongoing battle with the Sunshine Haven administration over internet access. As he prepared to leave, Michael paused at the door. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small key. "It's to the safe deposit box, your safe deposit box. I never accessed it, but the bank sent the renewal notice to my address." I accepted the key, our fingers briefly touching. "Thank you. There's something else." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside was a check, the first repayment of the money he'd diverted from my accounts. "Michael, please," he interrupted, "let me do this. Not because the court ordered it, but because it's right." I studied his face, searching for the grandson I'd raised. For the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of him, in the uncertainty of his posture, the absence of arrogance in his eyes. "Will you come again?" I asked. "If you'll let me." "Next Friday, same time," I said. "Bring those cookies from Baker's Square, the chocolate ones with walnuts." His smile was tentative but real. I remember. After he left, I joined Ruby in the community room where she was setting up her easel. "How did it go?" she asked. "It's a beginning," I replied, watching through the window as Michael walked to his car. "Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. After everything he did, you're giving him another chance?" Ruby's tone held no judgment, only curiosity. I considered the question carefully, thinking of the boy who had become a man, who had become a stranger, who was now trying to find his way back. "I'm not doing it for him," I said finally. "I'm doing it for me, for the teacher who spent her life believing people can learn and change, for the grandmother who never stopped loving her grandson, even when he forgot how to love her back." Ruby squeezed my hand. "That's the Eleanor I know." As I watched Michael drive away, I remembered something I used to tell my students when they struggled with difficult lessons. The greatest gift a teacher can give is not knowledge, but the chance to try again after failure. Michael had failed himself as much as me. But in that failure, perhaps he'd finally learned the lesson I'd tried to teach him all along, that true success isn't measured in titles or bank accounts, but in how we honor the promises we make to those who sacrificed for us. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for us, but then the best stories rarely end as we expect. They simply continue, one page turning to the next, offering new chapters we never anticipated. And this chapter, imperfect as it was, felt like one worth reading. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. My son said he was embarrassed. I was just a cleaning lady. Then his CEO boss made him realize I was the reason he had a job. Sometimes the people we love the most see us the least, until something forces them to truly look. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and redemption. I froze in the hallway, my hand clutching the serving tray so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sound of my son's voice drifted from the dining room, clear as a bell despite his attempt at a whisper. "I can't present a cleaning lady as my mother to the board of directors," Ethan said to his wife, Catherine. "We've worked too hard to get to this point." The words hit me like a physical blow. For 27 years, I'd scrubbed floors and cleaned toilets at Clean Pro Services to put food on our table after my husband died. 27 years of backaches and chemical-roughened hands so my son could go to college, build his career at Horizon Technologies, and become the executive celebrating his promotion tonight in our cramped, suburban Boston dining room. What if someone recognizes her? Catherine's voice was tense. Someone's bound to make the connection. Nobody will. She doesn't exactly move in our circles. I watched my grandson Timothy's eyes widen as he spotted me in the hallway. At 12, he was old enough to understand the cruelty in his father's words. His gaze dropped to the floor, shoulders hunching with secondhand shame. My throat tightened as I placed the tray on the side table. The chicken marsala I'd spent hours preparing suddenly seemed pathetic, my desperate attempt to prove my worth through a meal I couldn't even afford to eat regularly on my salary. "Mom?" Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting to forced brightness. "We were just wondering where you were with the food." I smoothed my Target dress, the nicest thing I owned, and smiled. "Just adding the finishing touches." Catherine appeared behind him, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Martha, you've outdone yourself. Though next time, perhaps something more contemporary? I could send you some recipes." I nodded. the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up my neck. As we moved to the table, I caught Timothy watching me, something like apology in his eyes. Later, as Ethan toasted his promotion, I raised my water glass with trembling hands. "To my son," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've always been proud of you." For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker across his face, recognition, perhaps, of the statement's double edge, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Driving home to my small apartment that night, I replayed the conversation in my head. 27 years of sacrifice reduced to an embarrassment, a dirty secret to be hidden away. As I parked in front of my building, I noticed my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. Something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. "Not anymore," I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't yet know what that meant, but for the first time in decades, I felt something other than resignation. Tomorrow would be different. I just didn't know how. "Use the back door, would you, Martha?" Catherine's smile was brittle as she blocked the front entrance to my son's house. Behind her, I could see a dining room full of people in business attire. "We're having a little impromptu gathering." Ethan's boss dropped by with some colleagues. I stood on the doorstep, clutching the container of homemade cookies I'd brought for my regular Sunday visit with the grandkids. "I didn't know you were having a party. Last-minute thing?" She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "If you could just go around back and maybe help in the kitchen? We're a bit overwhelmed." I recognized the lie immediately. Her catering services van was parked in the driveway. "Of course," I murmured, already stepping backward. The kitchen staff barely acknowledged me as I slipped in through the service entrance. I stood awkwardly in the corner, still holding my cookies, watching uniformed servers prepare elaborate hors d'oeuvres. Through the kitchen door, I spotted Ethan laughing with a distinguished older man. My son looked completely at ease, as if his mother wasn't hiding in the kitchen like a shameful secret. "Grandma!" Timothy's face lit up as he pushed through the swinging door. He wrapped his arms around my waist, smelling of the expensive shampoo Catherine insisted on. I hugged him back, grateful for his warmth. "I brought your favorite," I said, offering the container. "Timothy!" Catherine appeared in the doorway, her voice sharp. "What are you doing in here?" "Visiting Grandma," he answered, already reaching for a cookie. Catherine's eyes narrowed. "When we have important guests, it's Mrs. Jenkins, remember? And now isn't the time. Go back to the party." Timothy's face fell. "But now, please." After he left, Catherine turned to me. "Martha, I don't mean to be rude, but perhaps today isn't the best day for a visit." I nodded, setting down the cookies. "I understand. I'll go. And next time, please call before coming over." She hesitated, then added with forced lightness, "You know how busy Ethan is these days." As I drove home, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just about today. The weekly Sunday visits I'd counted on since Timothy was born were being systematically eliminated. The pattern continued. A family dinner postponed indefinitely. A school recital where my seat was mysteriously given away. Each excuse more transparent than the last. One evening, I called Ethan directly. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "I feel like I'm being kept away." A long pause. "Mom, it's not personal. It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" Another pause. "My position requires certain appearances. You understand, right?" I did understand. I was the wrong appearance. That night, I stared at my uniform hanging on the closet door, the dark blue polyester with Clean Pro embroidered above the breast pocket. For the first time, I wondered if my lifetime of sacrifice had been worth it. The next morning, I received a notification from my supervisor. Clean Pro had secured a new contract with Horizon Technologies, my son's company. They needed experienced cleaners for the night shift. My finger hovered over the Accept Assignment button on my phone. Part of me wanted to refuse, to avoid any chance of embarrassing my son further. Instead, I pressed Accept. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding. "Corporate photos sure don't tell the whole story," I muttered, wiping dust from a frame containing Ethan's professional biography on the executive wall at Horizon Technologies. The studio-perfect smile, the expensive suit, the carefully crafted words beneath the glass. Born to educator parents, Ethan Jenkins developed his passion for excellence early. Educator parents, not parent, and certainly not cleaning lady mother. I'd been working the night shift at Horizon for 2 weeks, carefully avoiding the finance floor where Ethan worked. Each night, I scrubbed and polished the offices of people who would never see me, who would never know I existed unless something wasn't clean to their standards. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder for Timothy's birthday party tomorrow. I'd received a formal invitation in the mail, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the boy's grandmother. At least I was invited, I whispered, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. The party was worse than I imagined. When I arrived at the country club, a host directed me to a table far from the family, where the catering staff and party entertainers sat. I watched from a distance as Ethan and Catherine worked the room, moving easily among Boston's upper-middle-class professionals. When I approached Timothy to give him his gift, Catherine intercepted me. "The children are playing a game right now," she said, her fingers digging into my arm as she steered me away. She leaned close, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I think it's better if you don't draw attention to yourself." I watched her whisper something to the children. Timothy's eyes flicked to me, then away quickly. Whatever she said had worked. He didn't approach me again. Later, I overheard a conversation between Ethan and a colleague about family backgrounds. "My father was in academics," Ethan said smoothly. "My mother," he faltered briefly. "She was in support services." I nearly laughed at the creative phrasing. Support services. As if I'd been an administrative assistant instead of the woman who cleaned toilets and emptied trash. That night, I returned to my apartment and opened my laptop. A quick search brought up Ethan's company profile. There it was in black and white. Born to James and Martha Jenkins, both educators. My late husband had indeed been a high school math teacher before his death, but I had never been anything but a cleaning lady with an unfinished technical degree in administration. As I closed the laptop, my phone lit up with a text from my supervisor at CleanPro. "Special request tomorrow. CEO's meeting room needs prep before early morning meeting. Pays extra." I accepted immediately, partly for the money, but mostly because something was changing inside me. Each discovery of Ethan's shame felt less like a wound and more like fuel for a fire I'd long suppressed. In my bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. The gray-streaked hair I couldn't afford to color professionally. The lines earned from years of physical labor. The eyes that had seen too much disappointment. "Support services," I said to my reflection, testing the phrase. Then I laughed, a hard sound that surprised even me. "Well, Martha, maybe it's time to give them some real service." I slept restlessly that night, dreaming of invisible women wiping away their own existence. "You're Martha, right?" The man's voice startled me as I finished polishing the conference table at 6:30 a.m. I hadn't expected anyone for at least another hour. I straightened, wincing at the familiar ache in my lower back. "Yes, sir, I'm just finishing up." He was in his early 50s, with kind eyes and a casual confidence that marked him as someone important. "I'm Richard Dawson, HR Director. I like to come in early when we have board meetings." Instead of dismissing me or simply ignoring my presence as most executives did, he extended his hand. "Thank you for your work. This place looks immaculate." The simple acknowledgement caught me off guard. I wiped my hand on my uniform before shaking his. "Just doing my job, Mr. Dawson." "Richard, please." He set his briefcase down. "How long have you been with CleanPro?" 27 years. The number hung between us, a testament to a lifetime of labor. His eyebrows rose. "That's impressive loyalty. You must have seen companies come and go." "More than I can count," I admitted. "But this is one of the better contracts. Clean building, respectful staff mostly." "Mostly?" He smiled. I backpedaled quickly. "Oh, everyone's been fine. I just meant in general." He leaned against the table, seemingly in no hurry despite the early hour. "Do you have family in Boston?" The question was innocent, but I hesitated. "Yes, a son and grandchildren." "What does your son do?" Pride warred with caution. "He works in corporate finance." I busied myself arranging chairs. "Where at?" The moment stretched. I could lie, but something in Richard's genuine interest made me answer honestly. "Here, actually. Ethan Jenkins is my son." Richard's surprise was evident. "Ethan Jenkins? Our newest finance director?" I nodded, tension creeping into my shoulders. "Please don't mention it to him. He's private about family matters." Richard studied me with new interest. "He's never mentioned his mother works here." "Not works here," I corrected quickly. "I'm contracted through CleanPro, and he doesn't know I'm assigned to this building." I hesitated. I'd appreciate if it stayed that way. Something flickered across Richard's face, understanding. Perhaps, or concern. "Of course, that's your business." He checked his watch. "I should let you finish. Thank you again, Martha. After he left, I leaned against the table, heart racing. Something about the encounter left me unsettled. It wasn't fear of Ethan discovering my presence, but rather the strange feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. Over the next few days, I noticed Richard observing the cleaning staff with unusual attention. Once, I overheard him correct a young executive who had snapped his fingers at one of my colleagues. "Everyone deserves basic respect," Richard said firmly, "especially the people who make our work possible." The following week, I was dusting the HR department when I spotted Ethan through an open door, speaking with Richard. My son's back was to me, but I could see his body language confident to the point of arrogance. "The custodial budget is an easy target for cuts," Ethan was saying. "Those people make minimum wage anyway." Richard's eyes briefly met mine over Ethan's shoulder. I ducked away, but not before hearing his response. "Those people, as you call them, are essential workers, and I'd appreciate if you remembered that everyone here deserves dignity, regardless of their position." I hurried away, my face burning with a complex mix of emotions: shame at my son's attitude, gratitude for Richard's defense, and something new stirring beneath it all: resolve. That night, I stared at the faded acceptance letter from the technical college I'd abandoned after my husband's death. 25 years later, it was long past relevant, but I couldn't help wondering, what if I hadn't given up everything? What kind of example had I set for my son? "Enough," I whispered. "Tomorrow would be different. I just needed to figure out how." The storage room smelled of dust and forgotten ambitions. I'd been assigned to clean out the archives scheduled for shredding mindless work, moving bankers' boxes from shelves to the disposal cart. Most cleaners hated this task, but I found comfort in organizing other people's discarded histories. "Scholarship Program Records 2005-2008, read one label. I hesitated before placing it on the cart. That time frame overlapped with Ethan's college years. I shouldn't look. It wasn't my business. But whose business was it? If not the mother who'd raised him alone. I opened the box, justifying my invasion with efficiency. I needed to ensure nothing important was accidentally discarded. Inside were folders organized by year, then alphabetically by recipient. My fingers trembled slightly as I found the J section in 2006. There it was, Jenkins, Ethan Horizon Community Support Scholarship. I knew about the scholarship, of course. It had covered his tuition when my meager savings couldn't. But Ethan had always described it as merit-based, something he'd earned through academic excellence. I opened the folder. The first document was Ethan's application essay, filled with flowery language about perseverance and ambition. Below it lay the scholarship committee's assessment form. Candidate qualifies under Category C, Children of Essential Service Contractors. Parent, Martha Jenkins. Clean Pro Services, 9 years service. My heart stuttered. The scholarship had been specifically for children of service workers. Ethan had never mentioned this detail. I flipped through more pages, finding a thank you letter from Ethan to the committee. His handwriting, still youthful, but unmistakably his, grateful for this opportunity that recognizes my mother's contributions to Horizon through her cleaning service. However, I request confidentiality regarding the specific category of my scholarship, as I am working to establish my professional identity separate from my origins. My hands shook so badly I had to set the papers down. He had known. All this time, he had known that his education, the foundation of his career, was directly tied to my embarrassing profession. Deeper in the file was a follow-up letter from his junior year. "Have successfully transcended my humble beginnings, and would prefer all future communications exclude references to custodial services." The betrayal felt physical, like a blow to my chest. Not just that he'd hidden the truth, but that he'd been ashamed of me from the very beginning. I carefully returned everything to the folder, closed the box, and sat on the cold concrete floor. Tears threatened, but something harder and more determined pushed them back. That evening, I called Ethan, keeping my voice light. "I was just remembering how proud I was when you got that scholarship to Northeastern." "Yeah, that was a big deal," he replied, distracted. "Listen, Mom, I'm heading into a meeting. Was it called the Horizon Community Support Scholarship?" I pressed. A pause. "I think so. It was a long time ago. Do you remember what it was for? What made you eligible?" His voice tightened. "Academic achievement. Academic. Obviously. Mom, I really need to go." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wall. The foundation of my relationship with my son, my sacrifice for his success, was built on a lie. Not my lie, but his. For the first time in decades, I felt something beyond hurt and resignation. Something like anger, but cleaner, more purposeful. I opened my laptop and searched for Adult Education Programs Boston. Then, with steadier hands than I'd had all day, I typed Professional Development Opportunities for Service Workers. The first result was a Horizon Technologies initiative called Career Pathways. The program description mentioned Richard Dawson specifically. I bookmarked the page, a plan forming in my mind. If Ethan had built his success on my work while denying it, perhaps it was time I built something for myself, without hiding anything. You have more qualifications than you give yourself credit for, Martha, Richard said, reviewing my application for the Career Pathways program. Treasurer of your church for 15 years? That's significant financial management experience. I shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair across from his desk. After 2 weeks of deliberation, I'd finally worked up the courage to apply for the Professional Development Program for Service Contractors. It was just balancing the books for the congregation, I said. Nothing fancy. Richard raised an eyebrow. Managing a $200,000 annual budget isn't nothing fancy, and your technical college coursework in administration, even if you didn't finish the degree. That was 30 years ago, but you've kept your skills current. I see you've completed computer literacy courses at the community center. I nodded, remembering the Saturday mornings spent learning Excel while my peers enjoyed their weekends. I didn't want to fall behind. That's exactly the kind of initiative we're looking for. Richard closed my file. You're accepted into the program. You'll maintain your regular cleaning schedule 4 nights a week, with 2 mornings dedicated to administrative training. My heart raced. Are you sure I qualify? There must be younger applicants. Martha, Richard interrupted gently, you're exactly who this program was designed for. People with valuable skills and work ethic who haven't had the opportunity to advance. He paused. I grew up watching my mother clean houses for a living. I know what it's like. I blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you. That night, I started a journal. Not the dramatic kind with Dear Diary entries, but a factual record of events, conversations, and my own reflections. If I was going to reinvent myself at 58, I wanted to document the journey. The first entry was simple. Applied and accepted to Career Pathways. Ethan still doesn't know I work at Horizon. Started with basic Excel training today. Each day brought small victories. Mastering a new software function. Receiving a compliment from an instructor. The growing ease with which I navigated the corporate environment that had once seemed so foreign. I created a separate section in my journal specifically about interactions with Ethan and Catherine. Recording their dismissive comments and exclusions wasn't about building resentment, but about acknowledging a pattern I'd enabled for too long. 3 months into the program, Timothy started visiting me after school. Catherine's busy schedule meant he was often alone until evening, and my apartment was closer to his school than their house. Dad never talks about when he was my age, Timothy said one afternoon, helping me prepare dinner. What was he like? I told him stories about Ethan's childhood, his determination to excel, his paper route to save for his first computer, the nights I'd find him asleep on his textbooks. Did you always clean buildings? Timothy asked, his 12-year-old directness catching me off guard. Yes, I answered honestly. After your grandfather died, it was the best job I could get without a college degree. It paid the bills and gave me flexibility to be there for your dad. Timothy nodded thoughtfully. Dad gets weird when people ask what you do. I focused on chopping vegetables. Some people judge others by their jobs. That's stupid, he declared with adolescent certainty. You work harder than anyone I know. His words warmed something long cold inside me. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed that simple validation. That evening, when Catherine picked him up, she noticed the administrative training manual on my coffee table. Taking classes? She asked, tone suggesting the futility of such efforts at my age. Just keeping my mind active, I replied, not ready to reveal my transformation. Not yet. The next morning, as I practiced my new database skills in the Horizon training room, I caught my reflection in the darkened computer screen, straightened posture, focused eyes, a quiet confidence I hadn't possessed in years. The cleaning lady was still there, but someone else was emerging too. Your data entry accuracy is exceptional, Martha, my supervisor in the administrative department noted, reviewing my morning's work. Would you be interested in taking on some additional responsibility with the vendor database? A year into the Career Pathways program, I'd established a new routine: cleaning 4 nights a week, administrative work 2 mornings, and my first ever paid vacation time approaching. My hands still showed the wear of decades of cleaning, but my employee badge now had dual department designations. "I'd love to," I replied, the confidence in my voice no longer feeling foreign. Later that evening, as I cleaned the executive floor, a task I still performed, despite my advancing administrative role, I heard familiar voices around the corner. I froze, spray bottle in hand, as Ethan and Catherine emerged from the elevator. "I still don't understand why you need to check the presentation room tonight," Catherine was saying. "The event isn't until next week." "Because I need everything perfect," Ethan replied, not noticing me standing partly hidden by an open supply closet. "The quarterly investors meeting is—" He stopped abruptly as he finally saw me. Recognition, shock, and then unmistakable horror crossed his face. "Mom?" The word escaped like air from a punctured tire. I straightened, spray bottle still in hand. "Hello, Ethan." "Catherine." Catherine's eyes widened, darting from my uniform to my face. "Martha, what are you doing here?" "My job," I replied simply. "I've been with the Clean Pro team assigned to Horizon for over a year now." Ethan's face had drained of color. "A year? You've been cleaning my building for a year without telling me?" "You never asked where I was working," I pointed out. "And I specifically requested assignments away from the finance floor." Catherine's perfectly manicured hand clutched her purse strap. "Does anyone know you're Ethan's mother?" The question's naked panic might have hurt me a year ago. Now it merely confirmed what I already knew. "That's not really relevant to how well I clean, is it?" Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, you need to request a transfer. This is completely inappropriate." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he would articulate his shame. Because it creates a conflict of interest," he stammered. "I don't see how. I don't report to you. I don't clean your office. We're in completely different departments and shifts." "Different departments?" Catherine interjected. "What does that mean?" I hadn't planned to reveal my full transformation yet, but the moment seemed right. "I'm also part of the administrative team now, through the Career Pathways program. I work in vendor management 2 mornings a week." Ethan's expression shifted from embarrassment to something closer to panic. "You're working in administration? Here? Since when?" "About 6 months now," I replied. "Richard Dawson has been quite supportive." "Richard knows about this?" Ethan's voice rose slightly. Before I could answer, a familiar voice came from behind me. "Knows about what?" Richard approached, nodding cordially. "Evening, Ethan, Catherine. I see you've run into one of our most promising Pathways participants." The silence that followed was deafening. "You knew my mother was working here," Ethan finally managed. Richard's expression remained pleasantly neutral. "Of course. Martha's contributions have been valuable in both capacities." He turned to me. "Actually, Martha, I wanted to discuss your involvement in next week's service recognition ceremony. We'd like you to speak about your experience in the program." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. "I'd be honored," I replied. After Richard continued down the hall, Catherine tugged at Ethan's arm. "We should go." Ethan looked at me, conflict evident in his expression. "We need to talk about this, soon." I nodded, returning to my cleaning cart. "I'm free for lunch tomorrow if you'd like." As they walked away, I heard Catherine's urgent whisper, "How could you not know she was working in your own building?" The answer was simple, though I doubted Ethan would admit it. He had never really seen me at all. That night, I added to my journal, recording the encounter in detail. Then I made a deliberate decision. I would create a second, edited version including only what Ethan needed to see to understand the impact of his actions, and leave it where he would eventually find it, not as punishment, but as a mirror. "I need you to listen, not talk," Ethan said, his voice tight as we sat in a small cafe 3 blocks from Horizon. He'd insisted on somewhere his colleagues wouldn't frequent. I nodded, hands wrapped around my coffee mug. "This situation is untenable," he continued. "Do you have any idea how this looks? My mother working as a janitor in my company?" "Cleaning specialist," I corrected gently. "And administrative assistant now?" "Part-time." He waved this away. "It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you deliberately infiltrated my workplace without telling me." "Infiltrated?" I raised an eyebrow. "I took a job assignment through the company I've worked at for 27 years, the same company that was cleaning Horizon when you received your scholarship." His head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" "The Horizon Community Support Scholarship," I said evenly. "Category C, Children of essential service contractors. The color drained from his face. How did you— I found the records while cleaning the archive room. Records scheduled for destruction, ironically enough. I took a sip of coffee. You never told me your college education was directly tied to my cleaning job. Ethan's fingers drummed nervously on the table. It wasn't relevant. I earned that scholarship through my grades and application. You qualified for it because of my work, I corrected. Your academics made you competitive among eligible candidates, but without my position, you wouldn't have been considered at all. His jaw tightened. So what? You're working at Horizon to, what, punish me? Embarrass me? No, Ethan. I'm working there because it pays better than my previous assignment, offers professional development, and happens to be where my skills are valued. I leaned forward. Not everything is about you. A muscle twitched in his cheek. You need to transfer. Request another building. No. The simple refusal seemed to genuinely shock him. What do you mean, no? I mean, I won't be giving up opportunities to protect your carefully constructed image. I kept my voice level. I'm good at what I do, both jobs, and I'm not ashamed of either role. This isn't about shame, he protested too loudly, drawing glances from nearby tables. Isn't it? I asked softly. You've been ashamed of me for years, Ethan. You introduced me as a support services professional at your wedding. You listed both your parents as educators in your company bio. You've systematically excluded me from any event where I might interact with your colleagues or friends. That's not fair, he muttered, but without conviction. What's not fair is teaching your children to be embarrassed by honest work. Timothy asked me last week why he has to call me Mrs. Jenkins at public events instead of Grandma. Ethan winced. Catherine thinks— I know what Catherine thinks, I interrupted. The question is, what do you think? What example are you setting? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He checked it, relief crossing his features. I have to get back. There's an emergency meeting. I nodded, unsurprised by the convenient escape. We'll continue this later. As he stood to leave, I added, the company's 25th anniversary celebration is next month. I'll be there as part of the administrative team supporting the event. Panic flashed across his face. Mom, I won't approach you or acknowledge our relationship unless you initiate it, I assured him. Your secret is safe, as it's always been. After he left, I remained at the table, watching people pass by the window. Young professionals hurrying back to offices, service workers delivering packages, custodians emptying sidewalk trash cans, all part of the same ecosystem, each role essential. My phone pinged with a message from Richard. Committee approved your speaking role for the service recognition segment. Congratulations. For the first time in my adult life, I felt the ground beneath me solidify. I was no longer defined solely by my relationship to others, Ethan's mother, James's widow, but by my own emerging identity. That evening, I accidentally left my edited journal on Timothy's next visit, placing it under a magazine on my coffee table. A week later, it was gone. The countdown to confrontation had begun. They're saying you engineered this whole situation, Catherine hissed, cornering me in my apartment hallway. She'd shown up unannounced, face flushed with anger. That you deliberately took the Horizon contract to undermine Ethan's position. I stepped back to let her enter, closing the door behind us. Who's they, Catherine? Don't play innocent. We read your journal. She paced my small living room like a caged animal. All those entries about Ethan's betrayal and your plan to work at Horizon. You've been orchestrating this revenge plot for months. I sat calmly on my sofa. That journal contains facts, not plots. Everything I wrote happened exactly as described. She stopped pacing to glare at me. You left it for Timothy to find. You're manipulating a 12-year-old boy against his parents. I left it where anyone might find it, I corrected. The truth isn't manipulation, Catherine. The truth, she laughed bitterly. The truth is you're jealous of Ethan's success. You couldn't achieve anything yourself, so you're trying to tear him down. The accusation might have wounded me once. Now I recognized it for what it was, projection. I've never wanted anything but happiness for my son, I said quietly, even when that meant accepting my own exclusion from his life. Catherine's expression faltered slightly. He never excluded you. No? I raised an eyebrow. Should we count the family events I wasn't invited to? The times I was asked to use the service entrance? The way you both react when I'm recognized as Ethan's mother in public? She crossed her arms defensively. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Appearances matter in our world, And having a cleaning lady for a mother ruins appearances? Yes, she exclaimed, then immediately looked shocked at her own admission. She recovered quickly. I mean, it's complicated. People judge based on family background. Like your father, the school janitor? I asked softly. Catherine froze. How did you… Timothy mentioned it once. He was proud his other grandfather had worked at his school before retiring. Her face crumpled momentarily before she regained control. That was different, was it? I asked. Or have you both been running from the same thing? She sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. You don't understand what it's like, trying to fit into a world that wasn't made for people like us. I understand more than you think, I replied. But I made a different choice. I decided to be proud of my work instead of hiding it. Catherine stared at her manicured hands. It's too late for Ethan to suddenly embrace having a housekeeper mother. He's built his entire professional identity on a different narrative. Narratives can change, I said. The anniversary celebration is coming up. Richard has asked me to speak during the service recognition segment. Her head snapped up. You can't do that. I'm not going to announce I'm Ethan's mother if that's what you're worried about. I leaned forward. But I will be visible, Catherine. I won't hide anymore. She stood abruptly. Ethan will never forgive you if you embarrass him. The only person who can embarrass Ethan is Ethan, I replied, by being ashamed of honest work and the mother who raised him. After she left, I sat quietly, processing the encounter. Catherine's reaction had revealed something important. Beneath her polished exterior lurked the same insecurities she and Ethan projected onto me. They weren't villains, they were frightened people desperate to belong. That evening, my phone rang. Timothy calling from his private phone. Grandma, he whispered, Mom and Dad are fighting about you. Dad found your journal and now he's saying everything is falling apart. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle, I said gently. Dad's boss came over today too, he continued. Mr. Dawson, he was talking about some speech you're giving? I smiled slightly. That's right, for the company anniversary. Timothy was quiet for a moment. Are you going to tell everyone you're my grandma? The question hung in the air, laden with a child's uncomplicated pride. No shame, no fear, just the simple desire to be connected. Would you like me to? I asked. Yeah, he said immediately. Then maybe Dad would stop acting weird about it. Out of the mouths of babes. We'll see, Timothy. Sometimes grown-ups take longer to figure things out than kids do. After we hung up, I made the final entry in my journal. The truth doesn't destroy what's real, it only clears away what was false to begin with. The Horizon Technologies' 25th anniversary celebration transformed the company's atrium into an elegant venue. Crystal chandeliers hung from temporary rigging, casting warm light over tables draped in the company's colors. As part of the administrative support team, I'd spent the morning helping with final preparations, watching the space fill with executives, board members, and special guests. My heart raced as I spotted Ethan across the room in deep conversation with Catherine. They hadn't spoken to me since our confrontation 2 weeks ago. Timothy stood nearby, fidgeting with his tie, looking bored until he spotted me. His face lit up, and he started in my direction before Catherine's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Richard approached me, program in hand. All set for your speech? I nodded, smoothing my new dress, the first I'd bought myself in years that wasn't from a discount store. Just a little nervous. You'll be wonderful, he assured me. Your journey exemplifies exactly what this company should stand for, recognizing potential, regardless of position. The formal program began with the CEO's welcome, followed by a video highlighting the company's growth. When Ethan was introduced to speak about building success through determination, I watched him climb the steps to the small stage, my son confident, accomplished, and still running from his own story. Success is built on recognizing opportunity, Ethan began, his voice steady as he delivered a polished speech about his rise through the company ranks. As he spoke, I noticed Timothy slip away from Catherine and make his way to my side of the room. He reached me just as Ethan concluded his remarks to enthusiastic applause. Grandma, he whispered, taking my hand. Are you really giving a speech? I squeezed his hand. Just a short one. Cool, he grinned. Dad never mentioned you were speaking too. Richard returned to the podium. Next, we recognize the contributions of our service partners who make Horizon's success possible. I'm pleased to introduce Martha Jenkins from our Career Pathways program, who brings a unique perspective as both a longtime service contractor and a new member of our administrative team. The room filled with polite applause as I made my way to the stage, Timothy's encouraging smile following me. From the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan freeze in conversation, his head snapping toward the podium. "Thank you, Richard," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "For 27 years, I've worked as a cleaning specialist, the last 2 of those here at Horizon Technologies. Many of you have never seen me because I worked nights while you were home with your families." I paused, scanning the room. "Invisibility becomes familiar when you work in service. We clean your offices, restock your supplies, and prepare your spaces, usually without recognition. But Horizon has been different, thanks to programs like Career Pathways." I continued, describing my journey from night cleaner to administrative assistant, careful not to mention Ethan specifically. As I spoke, I noticed Catherine whispering urgently to him, her expression panicked. "The most important lesson I've learned," I concluded, "is that no honest work should ever be a source of shame. Whether you clean floors or lead departments, your contribution matters." The applause was genuine, if somewhat surprised. As I stepped down, Richard announced, "Martha is just one example of the multi-generational impact of Horizon's community investments. Our scholarship program has helped dozens of service workers' children attend college, including some who later joined our own executive ranks." I returned to my seat beside Timothy, who beamed with obvious pride. Across the room, Ethan stood rigid, his expression unreadable. The rest of the event passed in a blur. As dessert was served, I saw Ethan excuse himself from his table and head toward the exit. Timothy tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, Dad's leaving. Are you going to talk to him?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I think it's time." I followed Ethan to a quiet hallway outside the main event space. He stood with his back to me, shoulders tense. "Ethan," I said softly. He turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm not doing anything to you," I replied. "I'm finally doing something for myself." "Everyone's going to figure it out," he said, voice cracking. Richard practically announced it with that scholarship comment. "Would that be so terrible?" I asked, "being known as the son of a cleaning lady who worked her way into administration?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. I understand shame, Ethan," I interrupted gently. "I've carried yours for years." Before he could respond, the door opened and Timothy appeared. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan quickly composed himself. "I'm fine, buddy. Just talking with Grandma." The simple acknowledgement the first time he'd called me Grandma in Timothy's presence at a public event hung in the air between us. Timothy looked between us, 12-year-old wisdom in his eyes. "Is this about you being embarrassed that Grandma cleans the building?" Ethan flinched. "Timothy, it's complicated." "No, it's not," Timothy insisted. "Grandma works hard and helps people. What's embarrassing about that?" Out of the mouths of babes. Indeed. 1 year later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting my blazer, not an expensive one, but well-fitted and professional. My hair, now styled in a modern cut, framed a face that looked years younger than it had when this journey began. "You look great, Grandma," Timothy said from the doorway of my new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom I'd moved into 6 months ago, closer to both work and family. "Thank you, sweetheart." I smiled at his reflection. At 13, he was growing so quickly, his dress pants were already showing his ankles. Catherine called from the living room. "If we don't leave in 5 minutes, we'll be late." The Horizon Scholarship ceremony, where I would be the keynote speaker, began in an hour. The event had special significance. It was the first time all the Jenkins family would attend a company function together, openly acknowledging our relationship. The past year hadn't been easy. After the anniversary celebration, Ethan had spiraled through several emotional phases: anger, denial, bargaining, and finally, a tentative acceptance. Our relationship remained a work in progress, with setbacks and difficult conversations. But we were really talking for the first time in decades. Catherine's transformation had been more surprising. After her initial resistance, she'd slowly revealed her own buried insecurities about her background. "I spent so long pretending to be someone else, I forgot who I really was," she admitted during one painful but healing dinner. We drove to Horizon together, Catherine chatting about the community college courses she'd started taking, inspired, she reluctantly admitted, by my example. Ethan was quieter, still adjusting to his recalibrated identity within the company. Contrary to his fears, the revelation of his mother's occupation hadn't destroyed his career. There had been some awkward moments and a few snide comments from colleagues, but also unexpected support. Richard had been right. Ethan's story of rising from humble beginnings through hard work and family sacrifice resonated with the company's values far more than his fabricated background had. The scholarship ceremony was held in the same atrium as the anniversary celebration a year earlier. As we entered, Richard greeted us warmly. "The woman of the hour," he said, embracing me briefly. "And the whole family. Wonderful." I scanned the room, recognizing many faces executives I now worked with regularly in my full-time administrative role. Cleaning staff I still considered colleagues, and students like my son had once been, full of ambition and possibility. When it was time for my speech, Ethan squeezed my hand. "Knock 'em dead, Mom." I approached the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd. 28 years ago, I became a cleaning specialist out of necessity. After losing my husband when our son was just 7 years old, it was honest work that paid the bills and kept a roof over our heads. I paused, making eye contact with Ethan. 17 years ago, that same job qualified my son for a Horizon scholarship that launched his career. Today, he's a director in this company. And I couldn't be prouder not just of his professional success, but of the man he's becoming. I continued, describing my journey through the Career Pathways program and the transformation it enabled. But the most valuable change hasn't been my job title or salary. It's been reclaiming my sense of worth and helping others recognize that every role in this company, from the people who clean your offices to those who lead your departments, deserves respect. After the ceremony, as we mingled at the reception, I watched Ethan introduce Timothy to colleagues, his voice clear as he said, "And of course you know my mother, Martha, from administration. No qualifiers, no evasions, just the simple truth." Later that evening, as we gathered for dinner at Ethan and Catherine's home, a weekly tradition now, rather than the occasional obligation it had once been, I observed my family around the table. Catherine, discussing her studies with animation, Timothy, regaling us with middle school adventures, and Ethan, watching me with new eyes, seeing me, perhaps for the first time. "What?" I asked, catching his gaze. "I was just thinking," he said quietly, "about how much I missed by being ashamed of where we came from." I reached across the table to take his hand. "We can't change the past, but we're writing a different future." He nodded, squeezing my fingers. "A better one." As I drove home that night to my new apartment, I reflected on the long journey from invisible cleaning lady to recognized professional, from a woman ashamed of her work to one who had helped transform an entire company culture. The road hadn't been straight or easy, and some wounds would always leave scars. But for the first time in decades, I was fully present in my own life, not just a supporting character in someone else's story. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.